So this interview series invites internet pioneers to reflect on the first wave of decentralization. What choices drove the adoption of web technologies and cultivated a vibrant internet culture? What false assumptions allowed the platform centralization and structural injustices of today's web? With this opportunity to re-decentralize, how can we ensure this process advances inclusivity, equity, and sustainability? So our first guest, Charles Broskoski, is the co-founder of Arena, a platform for collaborative research that takes inspiration from many of TED's ideas about navigating hypertext. Ted Nelson, Charles will give an introduction with, but before that, Ted and Charles will discuss Xanadu, visible connections, tools for thinking, and the presentational arts. I'll hand it over to Charles to introduce Ted.
Hello, how is everyone? Hello, Ted. So thanks to the Internet Archive for having us. Thank you all for coming. So I'm here because I work on a platform called Arena. We consider ourselves to be in this fuzzy category of tools for thinking. So with that in mind, needless to say, Ted has been a huge inspiration for me, so this is a really big honor, and especially in the context of this conference. We're definitely in a moment in time when people are trying to think about new architectures for the web, new ways of handling things. We have an opportunity to take parts of the web that work and scrap the parts that don't, and build new systems that solve the problems that we're facing today. And the idea for these conversations is to get people who have been thinking about these things at other moments and times and similar cusps in the history of computing and the web. People like Ted and also people like Kathy Marshall have been thinking about these things for a really long time. So this is an opportunity for us to learn from them. Ted is unique in that I think it's easiest to understand his work through the context of art. How many people in here have read Computer Lib Dream Machines by show of hands? Oh my God. Okay, for anyone who hasn't, now is definitely the time. Computer Lib Dream Machines is the perfect balance between inspirational and also oh yeah, hold it up. Oh, there's one. Perfect. It's the perfect balance between inspiration and a fuck you to the old ways of doing things. So perfect for now. Ted's greatest work, though, is still in progress. It's not a media, it's a medium, which I would also add is infinitely more hard to create than media. It's called Xanadu, and for 30 years, trademarked. Still registered. Ted has been steadfast and persistent in shaping this medium to his vision from more than 40 years ago. More than 50. As of late, Ted has been recording videos on his YouTube channel that revisits the basics of Xanadu and his vision for it. So without further ado, we're going to watch one of these videos as a way to ground the conversation where Ted explains the most important concepts, one of the most important concepts for Xanadu, visible connections. Thanks to Ted for being here. Let's clap for him.
Hi, I'm Ted Nelson. Jason Scott has rightly advised me to concentrate on the most important things I need to finish before I die. So I'm concentrating on what I want understood and usable for my Xanadu work. I realize now what this has to be, in retrospect, my most important idea. Is this technology? No, I think it's literature. I'm one of the few dissenters against the onslaught of what is called, quote, technology, unquote, but which I see as more and more oppression by technologists and their sponsors. I once thought computers would bring liberation, and I published a very successful book called Computer Lib. Now computers have created a vast new landscape of imprisonment with many political aspects. Today, I will talk about what should be the least political issue, document structure, but it turns out to be a political issue as well. Note that Xanadu is my trademark for software delivered by my programming teams There are other names you can use if you want to implement compatible software. We'll discuss that in other videos. Okay, the basic concept, visible connection on screens, which I'll show you in a few minutes, I consider to be the most important issue of software. Why is nobody else working on it? Okay, reset. It's not generally known that the World Wide Web was my idea in the 1960s. For 25 years, I thought I would create worldwide hypertext, but then another guy named Berners-Lee created his own version of worldwide hypertext, which left out visible connection. That other system caught on, the great disappointment of my life. What I called hypertext when I published the idea in 1965 was a deeper concept. Of course it had jump links like the web. Jump links were a very radical idea at the time, but it also had visible connections, two-way links showing as lines or beams or bridges. And I thought that kind of hypertext would be the new and basic text medium of the human race. I think of the World Wide Web as a fork of the Xanadu project based on a dumbed-down in the 70s at Brown University that threw out that most important part, visible connection. That important part, visible connection, is now the remaining radical concept of the Xanadu project. Let's just drive it home here. Main idea, visible connection. We need to see connections the kind books used to have. Here are some examples from literature. The Rosetta Stone. That's this white object here. It had 3 different documents. Egyptian hieroglyphic, Egyptian demotic, and Greek. It was a vitally important clue in history. The Hebrew Talmud. The Talmud is a system of comments on the original Hebrew Bible, the Torah, printed visibly next to what's being commented on. There are similar commentary writings connected to many religious documents in Christianity and Islam as well. In the Middle Ages, there were marginal glosses. Here we see a marginal gloss and interlinear glosses, which are part of the document. This is from the Royal Library of Copenhagen, care of Wikipedia. Such annotations were common throughout the Middle Ages. Here's a marvelous astronomy book from 1794 by James Ferguson. It's not in too bad shape considering it's over 200 years old. I've scanned it. Its science is completely valid today. I've scanned it onto the Internet Archive, just searched for astronomy, James Ferguson. It has wonderful fold-out pictures. Those had to be scanned in separately, but they're also at the archive. And here, printed in the margins, are summaries of the paragraphs beside them. This is parallel text, visibly connected, and we need to show it on our screens. Okay, how do we show visible connections on the screen? Here is a mock-up I did in the 1960s. I faked it with a typewriter, a neighbor, and some plastic. That's not a real computer screen. Nobody had them at the time. Here's the close-up. It's been 50 years since then, but in the years since, especially in the 30 years that people have had computer screens, my software teams have created a number of prototypes you can actually open and manipulate. I'll talk about my teammates and where to find the software in another video, Xanadu Basics 2. So here are some examples of connected parallel pages you can actually play with. This is the Xanadu Space Package, in various versions, showing connections of an essay to its sources and comments. The blue connections are links. The pink connections show the original sources. That was the essay Origins that I'm quite proud of, with links and sources. Now here's a version that's easier to read, except with no links, just the sources showing. This is the same essay without links, but connected to its sources in an interactive web page that you can open and easily step to the sources. It's easy to step to each source. Here's a cute one called Cosmic Book, which I did with Ian Heath in England. Not in our main path, but it's cute. This is Cosmic Book, another prototype by a different method from the others. But we see visible connections between the texts in the different pages. Now we see connected documents in Xanadu Cambridge, our latest. Here we have a Xanadoc. Right now it's disguised as plain text, but if we want to see connections, here they are. The ones outlined in blue are Xanalinks. They aren't just jump links, what other people call hyperlinks. I've called them jump links since before the web. You're jumping to you know not where. It's a diving board into darkness. Whereas Xanalinks visibly connect to other content with a visible bridge. The other documents open and I can scroll around in them. When I click, I close them again by clicking. This is, of course, only one possible interface. Now I'll show you the finest achievement of any of my teams. Xanadu Classic, designed in 1979, a cross between a document system and an operating system, based on a unique mathematics of addressing and editing. But you won't see what's underneath, just the documents it's opening. I'll tell you what's underneath in Xanadu Basics 2. This is our classic Xanadu program, opening 2 versions of the Declaration of Independence. The colored sections, connected by colored lines, are the parts which are unchanged between Jefferson's first draft and his second, the final draft of the Declaration of Independence on the right. We can see exactly what he changed. Okay, I've shown you different visualizations of visible connection between parallel pages. The appearances can change, they're arbitrary. These very different interfaces are, as it were, painted on top. What matters is the structures underneath, which I'll discuss in the next video, Xanadu Basics 1A. I am deeply sorry that this form of literature is not yet widely deployable in software, with a good editor and a way to publish them, but it is my duty to keep striving so that you can eventually write and publish parallel connected documents like these. What is the matter with the world? There used to be parallel page and layouts in books. From medieval manuscripts to the printed pages of yesteryear, visible parallelism was recognized as important, but in the digital age it has gotten lost. Nowhere in the interactive world are there parallel pages and layouts except for the Xanadu prototypes. There is no way in Microsoft Word, no way in PDF, no way in ebooks, no way on the web. They're all one damn column. One logical column, unconnectable. You can have multiple columns side by side in Microsoft Word, but they can't be connected sideways. As far as I know, only the Xanadu project has tried to make a new medium out of interactive parallel pages with visible connections. I have thought all these years that visible connection on the screen was obvious and necessary. Unfortunately, I didn't bother to stress visible connection in my rather influential book, Literary Machines, because I thought it was completely obvious. It's in the illustrations. And here. These are pictures of how a connection was supposed to look on the screen. But since no one who read the book implemented visible connections, since no one else in the computer world seems to recognize the need, now I see that I'm in an adversarial position. All right, the gauntlet is down. Time to be a little less polite. Laymen and scholars see this need, but the techies and the font chauvinists don't. To me, this is one of the most important things that human civilization needs, and I can't understand why no one else is working on it. So many things in the world are parallel and need to be presented in their parallelism. Connected parallel pages, flights of documents, have so many uses. Comments, annotations, details, summaries, alternatives, outlines, tables of contents, even footnotes should be on the side, I believe. The many parallel threads of history need to be visibly connected for the reader's understanding. History so easily gets lost and distorted. We're all in a hurry. There's so much to know and not to know. So, There still lurks in the realm of possibility a literary medium of parallel pages. What to call it, I'll discuss in another video. Parallel pages won't eliminate sequence, but they loosen the paradigm of sequential text. Allowing the author to write side-by-side texts should make writing easier. As a writer and a scholar and a publisher, I have wanted these interactive parallel documents for 50 years. It is very painful not to have a deployed system that I and others can use. So my problem is getting this basic medium of parallel pages to work. There are many sub-problems that I'll discuss later. But software development is difficult, especially on a low budget when you're challenging the majority paradigm. And the techies like things the way they are, single columns of text with no visible connections. The initial plausibility of Project Bravo, which became Microsoft Word, has locked us in. I'm not saying that Simonian, Warnock, Rulifson, and Tesler and Berners-Lee are bad people, just that they were rewarded so much for narrowing the concept of documents that they've locked us in and thrown away the key. Links need to be visible and two-way, so you can go in either direction. In 1979, my team and I figured out how. That's the indirect document shown in the next video. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Oh, let's see how let's stretch. Okay. Yeah, I was thinking about mentioning this in the intro, but I think actually now is the better time for it. So one of the things I've thought about in preparing for this and thinking about your work over a long time is the burden of having an idea on the scale of visible connections. I think other people have kind of made this point in talking about your career, but it's really true that there's certain kinds of ideas that are iterative. So it's really easy for people to grasp onto them because they know what to compare it to. For something like visible connections, it's so abstract, it's outside of the realm, and so people can only glimpse at the possibilities. But you're faced with that burden of holding on to that great idea for this whole time. So my question to you is, following this video, what is about visible connections what are the qualities of visible connections that have made you hold on for this long?
It's obvious. But there have been paranoid OCD thinkers with their own locked-in obsessions, I'm sure, since the dawn of humanity. So the validity is in the testing and trying to make it work. And I'm sure there are many wonderful ideas which died with their creators, and there are many non-wonderful ideas which have been pushed on by successful writers. So I'm one of those, but the fact that I happen to be healthy at 81, and the fact that people have at least liked my writings and half gotten the idea is wonderful. And now I'm still on it. What was the question? Yeah. How did I keep going? Well, I just did. There's no alternative. I mean, if you're obsessed with an idea, you can't let go of it. Yeah. I mean, look at all the theologians.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I'm wondering what are the parts that attract you to visible connections? What are the possibilities that you imagine?
When I started writing term papers when I was 14. They said, well, we want a 10-page paper. I couldn't write 10 pages because there was so much I couldn't bear to leave out. Every description leaves something out, yeah? These are my two mantras. Every description leaves something out, and there's too much to say, and it goes in all directions. So writing is the problem of embracing somehow this flood of thoughts and reducing it as much as you can to a comprehensible simplification. Now, this always pained me, it still does. And so learning to rewrite and learning to cut things out has always been extremely painful. So the problem of writing and saying things. So what is a footnote? It's a thought trying to escape in another direction, okay? There are so many additional details you'd like to put somewhere.
where can you put them? So the notion of parallel text, when I finally saw, okay, in 1960, I took this computer course, and by that time I thought I was a filmmaker. You can look at my student film online. I still think it's great. Most people can't handle it because it's a melancholy comedy about loneliness at college in a slow, melancholy atmosphere in black and white with bad synchronization. If you can get past that, it's a masterpiece. So on the basis of this, I thought I was a born filmmaker and saw the world that way. So then I took a computer course in 1960 in graduate school. And I saw that you can put interactive screens on a computer. Well, it leaped out at me right there. Of course it costs $50,000 now or whatever, but the prices are dropping, and the interactive screen will be the new home of the human race. To me, this was obvious. So what is my job? My job, my God-given job, I'm an atheist, but somehow I've reconciled it. My destined necessity, my destined obligation is to create the documents of the future that will properly use the screen, because the techies will oversimplify it. And that is precisely what has happened. I have kept on with this project. We reached a high point in 1979 with the brilliant design of my team, which I'm calling now Xanadu Classic. And you can download it. If you're brave, you can download it to Apache. If you want, you can download the virtual machine and run it in VMware. And you can actually play with that. But the only demo we have is that Thomas Jefferson one with Jefferson's first draft and the final draft of the Declaration of Independence that was not signed on July 4th, but everybody says it was. And you can compare them and see exactly what the same beautiful interface done by Copying E. But the point is that recognizing parallelism as an essential part of thought. I mean, we think in parallel all the time, yeah? History is so parallel, and yet every piece of writing reduces it to a single stripe down the page. And these damned web pages in faint sans serif with acres of white space on both sides. I don't understand it. But aside from these stylistic concerns, the structural concern, the structure of thought, the structure of connection is what we're trying to represent. And I thought structure of connection is very deep in my thinking. But what structures of representation, what structures of connection can we best represent? And so I have focused down on the notion of parallel pages with visible connection as the most understandable and simplest way to extend writing as we know it without jarring the reader, without asking you to learn complications. I mean, there are some down the line, but to start with, not. So we're trying to implement that. And I would allow me to digress or to expatiate. I consider myself an artist, like most of the people in this room. And my art form is taking a complex cloud of thought and trying to make an elegant reduction. Whether it's a piece of writing, and I begin with far too many scraps of paper with different wonderful one-liners on them that I'd like to work in somehow. But you can't do that. You have to make a continuous stripe. The best piece of writing I've ever did was my eulogy for Doug Engelbart. If you go to my homepage, hyperland.com, I just put up my three best things. One is my three best videos. One is the eulogy for Douglas Engelbart, which is a piece of writing, which I think elegantly reduces so many things I wanted to say to one short presentation. Unfortunately, people are laughing all the time, but I was actually weeping. I wasn't acting. The other is the Xanadu project, where I took all the ways you might want to connect thought and represent thought, and I said, well, what will people understand if they see it on the screen? And finally, okay, so the web was a subset, because jump links were obvious to me. but being able to have parallel pages with visible connection was a fundamental part. And that's the part that Tim dropped. I mean, I like Tim. We've had great conversations yesterday. But he didn't see that, partly because in a project at Brown University in the 1960s, I misspoke in the 1970s, that part was dropped. I have a certain bitterness about that project. Okay, so anyway, so the art form is the reduction of complexities to simplification. There's also, I have a technical system called Zigzag, which is combined spreadsheet, irregular spreadsheet, and database, but we won't get into that here. But each of these three things, spreadsheet and Xanadu, Zigzag, and that piece of writing, all represent the same, to me, process of the reduction of a cloud of different thoughts, which could which anybody could make into a mess, and trying to make them into an elegant simplification, which in these three cases, I feel I've succeeded.
Thank you. So when we were talking yesterday, this is actually a perfect segue to my next question. You've talked a lot about how you compare yourself more to a filmmaker, cinematographer than filmmaker. Auteur. Filmmaker, auteur. And
the auteur is denounced in Hollywood, of course.
Yes. Yeah. We all know that.
It's a French concept, but there have been auteurs in Hollywood anyway.
So the analogy that you gave me when you were speaking about your filmmaker, your idea of being a filmmaker when making software is that some editors hand the footage directly over to an editor, right? Some directors hand the footage over to an editor and let them run with it. Some directors work directly with an editor to construct the film, and some directors just skip all of that, like Orson Welles, and do everything themselves because they can't bend
down to the last frame.
Down to the last frame. So it's interesting to me to think about that in terms of one, constructing a piece of software, and two, the idea that Xanadu, the idea is to represent thought, but it's also a way to escape editing and writing, right?
Heavens no. No. Once you have, if I give you this medium of blank parallel pages and the ability to connect them any way you like, now you have a broader canvas on which to write. Right. So you can put your main thoughts in one column and subsidiary and other stuff and fool around between the pages. But it's not, in no way does it simplify your task. Okay. It is my thinking. Maybe it will. But I did say simplify, pardon me. The essential problem of saying a thing well and elegantly is not changed. A broader canvas may help. Mm-hmm. Now, by the way, the Orson Welles example is painful to me because I had no idea of the analogy when I started, but Orson, you see, had a meteoric career. By the time he was 22, he was on dozens of radio shows a week in New York. He sometimes hired an ambulance with flashing lights to go between studios. And he had his own theater in Harlem and a play on Broadway. And then he did the famous War of the Worlds radio broadcast. He had carefully written it into his contract that he would not be responsible for consequential damages of any of his scripts. The legend is that people died trying to escape the Martians. I think it's much less true, but there were cops in the lobby when he came down. And, but on the strength of the impact of his War of the World broadcast at Halloween, what was it, 1937 or thereabouts, one of those years, he was given the Orson contract in Hollywood. Did he go to film school? No. One kind lady gave him a notebook full of film tricks. He then proceeded to invent many new tricks in cinema, in his masterpiece, Citizen Kane, which thoughtlessly attacked William Randolph Hearst, one of the most powerful men in the United States, and assured the end of Orson's career. Not only that, but what did Rosebud mean? Well, according to the cynical author I can't remember the name of, Rosebud was actually William Randolph Hearst's name for the genitalia of his beloved, which he shared with people at the dinner table because he was an effusive fellow. And this guy, and so that was the last touch in the Citizen Kane that assured Orson's destruction. But Orson did not give up, and the rest of his life he went on, not giving up on his projects, dragging his projects behind him in a long train. For example, his film of Othello, finally made. Over the years, he had 5 different women playing Desdemona. But no one can tell because he's such a great editor. That actually happened to me in my student film. I had to do retakes 6 years later because certain shots were just unusable, and I put in my wife in the love scene, and nobody noticed. So, I feel these kindreds with Orson, who of course was an incomparable talent, but alas. A terrible precedent for my life.
How do I follow that up?
Say anything,
actually,
ask another question and
well,
I'll say anything.
Well, you talk a lot about the presentational arts, Fantix, Splandrix. Splandrimics, excuse me. So, can you...
I was trying to find a word early, when I started. I was trying to find a word that said, presentation by computers is not a technicality, it's an art form. Because there are presentational arts. Movies, writing, painting, diagrammatics. All of these are presentational arts where the impact on the heart and mind of the viewer is the objective. Now, they all involve technicalities. Gutenberg invented a new medium, which was movable type. The technicalities required him to find a mixture of lead and a mixture of ink that would stick to that mixture of lead. So that all of that was part of the technicalities toward a much more understandable system, which was that of movable type, which allowed the creation of what there had never been before, a publishing industry. So there are always technicalities, but the presentational arts, how to show things, are the same. Movie making and writing are to me the same. Diagrammatics are the same. I do them all. And I wanted to find a word for this that would encompass both the artistic side and the presentational side. So the one I came up with first in the early 60s was Splandremics. Splandremics. Well, I don't remember how many people I told that one to, and that certainly didn't catch on. I thought that your computer system for showing things would be a splandrome. But anyway, so then in 1974 in Computer Lib I came up with, I don't know where I came up with it, but I came up with the word Fantix based on phanein, the Greek word for to show, as in sycophant, as in hierophant, as in fantastic. So to show, and that didn't catch on either. My friend Dan Sandin, a physicist, said it was too broad. I said, too broad compared to physics? But anyway, that didn't catch on. So then I came up with virtuality. Now, virtuality, if you look up in old dictionaries, virtuality means the seeming of something. So the design of virtuality, to me, encompassed both the presentational art and the design of the medium through which it would be presented. Again, so designing the parallel pages with visible connection, that's a medium, but then what you would put in it would also be a design of the user. So that didn't catch on, and unfortunately, the term virtual, thanks to my friend Jaron Lanier, now refers to 3D. So I'm stuck without a word for what I'm trying to talk about, and I just don't talk about it anymore. Except here.
But if you were to talk about it, how would you teach someone Fantix?
Oh, well, I've given it, my seminar title, I haven't trademarked it, but my seminar title, which I frequently give, is called Cinema of the Mind. So we start with the notion that presentation on that interactive screens are cinema. What is a movie? Events on a screen that affect the heart and mind of the viewer. What is interactive software? Events on a screen that affect the heart and mind of the viewer. and interact and have consequences. So what should we teach first? Interface technicalities or cinema? I think we should teach people how to show things, because then it becomes clear. I mean, signing up for this bloody conference, I couldn't use Eventbrite. It kept telling me that I hadn't filled out all the fields, but I had. So Mindy finally filled it. I had put spaces in my phone number. Well, now, any good programmer will use a regular expression to regularize all the inputs to a specific format. But oh no, we give this job to bozos who would rather punish and scold the user than make it work. So much for fantics and splandremic.
But you didn't answer the question. How would you teach someone that? How would you teach someone that to capture the hearts and minds of a viewer and interact with someone, as opposed to teaching the technicalities?
I would sit them down first. Trying to think of what movie has the great chase scenes. Oh yes, okay. Chaplin's The Kid, which is an absolute heartbreaker. And say, now, what concepts did we get across? What emotions did we feel? So how do we, what are the presentational structures that brought it about? So in a movie you have a virtual space. The term of virtual space I think was coined by the Russian filmmaker Pudovkin. So that you have a filmic space which is made up of a succession of images, and they may have all been taken in different places, but the audience doesn't care. The audience is seeing the flow of action. So that is the frame in which the presentation occurs. Now, when you're writing something, what is the space? What do you want a space in which you can write? And where do you put your notes? Well, Microsoft Word doesn't take care of that. You put your notes somewhere else, and we'll deal with that. So, I mean, there's a couple of, I think there's one piece of software, a couple of them that allow you to have a little ring of notes around the thing you're writing. But in fact, it's extremely difficult. I still use pieces of sticky notes as I am writing on the screen because there's no damn place to put them. And I use a program called Notational Velocity on the Mac because it allows me to manage 2,500 text files at great speed and find things. But as far as I'm concerned, I hate all software that almost all software I've ever used. And when I was not an enthusiast for the Macintosh when it came out because I thought my designs were better. But there you go. Jobs had a whole team behind him and the money.
Yeah, so to switch gears for a second, you mentioned your note-taking, you're putting stickies on the screen.
Mm.
So
no, I don't put them on the screen.
Put it on the screen next to the screen.
I typed them in.
Type them in, okay. So how does your physical archiving of notes and media and capturing things that you want to remember, how does that stuff relate to how you think about Xanadu?
I thought in the 1960s that computers would make it easy to keep track of things. And that was my greatest mistake. Because the difficulty of curating and harboring notes is spectacular. Stanford wants my archives because I'll probably never see most of them again. I have cartons and cartons of notes, cartons and cartons of diaries, which somebody may or may not be interested in the future. I like them especially because they validate things I said at certain times. I have cartons and cartons of the tapes I've been keeping of all of my lectures, the videos I've made of so many of my lectures, but finding them. I mean, I said great things which are lost. And so I have a sense of complete failure over that. So for the last 5 years, I've been able to manage my new stuff, what I can remember of my old stuff, and a few things I find that I have time to scan that I really want to take care of. And so they're on my in my current flight of memory sticks and the computer. But Again, there's no good way of cataloging all the memory sticks and all the files. So it's a nightmare. I see the number 5, but I think it's less now. I'm channeling the number 5.
I'm gonna go back. So, but do you see comparisons between your concept for visible connections and the way that you physically store notes and memories now?
No.
No.
I thought it would be ready long ago.
Yeah.
And of course, I thought I would get rich and then pay people to input all that stuff. the great mantra, later on, when there's enough time and enough money. Many people live by that. Quick, something.
All right. One last question. So the difference between cinema and software design is interaction, but there's still the hearts and minds part, right?
Yep.
So how do you think about developing a relationship with a person, a viewer, a user through software?
Well, right now I'm doing it on videos. It's interesting to note that the people who talk about ontologies, I've just had a long talk with Tim Berners-Lee yesterday about ontology. So the ontology system is allowing everybody to have a common reference structure for all the things they want to refer to. And his example was a washing machine. You want to buy a washing machine, now everybody knows that in the common ontology there's a washing machine. But I say, wait a minute, what about the things that are undefinable, ineffable, vague, have no borders? I mean, consider the sentence, heavy hangs the head that wears the crown. How do you say that in today's ontology language? And the answer, well,
Thank you so much, Ted.
Let's give one more round of applause for Ted and Kat.